You didn't think I was going to miss talking spoilers about this movie, did you? Really? I could not be more joyed that Spider-Man No Way Home blew all box office expectations out of the water. Nearly $1.9 billion, sixth highest grossing film of all time. I saw the movie twice in theaters. Second time I went with my sister, and because of it we both had a bout with Omicron afterwards, but we both shook it off like a case of fleas. So now it's about time for me to get into all the details of why I think this movie is great. Not quite phenomenal, but certainly great. I may have been a little disappointed that the movie didn't really focus on what it seemed it was going to focus on from the ending of Far From Home. It was really only the first 20 minutes that were about Peter dealing with the fact that the world now knows he's Spider-Man and they see him as a criminal. But hey, the story that it led to was still well worth seeing play out. The first big audience applause moment was one that I actually wasn't in on, because I guess I'm a little more casual of a Marvel fan than I thought I was. It was Matt Murdock's cameo, where he shows up to talk to Peter after picking up his case. When the audience cheered at the first screening I attended, I was confused. I turned to my friend and I was like, wait, should I know who that is? And he informed me that it was Daredevil. Oh yeah, there was a Daredevil series that I never watched, and apparently it did take place in the MCU. So I suppose I would have been a little more at home at that screening that Charlie Cox secretly attended, where unfortunately for him the theater was silent when he appeared on screen. So Daredevil helps Peter get the charges against him dropped, but it doesn't change the negative public image for him and his friends. He, MJ, and Ned can't get accepted into college. That's when Peter goes to Doctor Strange to request that he cast a spell to erase everyone's memory of who Spider-Man is, but with all the exceptions that Peter keeps trying to add to the spell, it goes awry, and a few figures from other universes get pulled in before Strange can contain it. Doc Ock is the first to follow the news to get to where Spider-Man is, unaware that he's not the Spider-Man he's after. During their battle on the highway bridge, the moment that I knew this was going to be such a fun collision of worlds is when Spider-Man activates the iron spider legs, and Doc Ock turns to his robotic arms and goes, "Looks like we got competition," and the spider legs and octopus arms just start duking it out. I also really liked when Doc Ock tries on some of Peter's nanotech, but then it backfires on him because it allows Peter to connect his system to the arms and therefore take control of them. I do have some questions regarding a few of the villains. First, something that left me wondering after my first viewing is that what the spell wound up doing was pulling in everyone from every universe who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, regardless of what version of Peter Parker it is. But if that's the case, then why is Electro there? In The Amazing Spider-Man 2, he never found out Spider-Man's identity. Now, on my second viewing, I did catch a line from Electro where he says that at the moment of his death, he was absorbing data from the power plant, which might be intended as an indication that among that data were text messages between Peter and Gwen, which revealed to Electro who Spider-Man was. I can't accept that as an explanation. What's a little less easy for me to swallow is Elektro's new appearance. When I saw him in the last trailer, I wondered if he got an arc reactor that allowed him to control his powers better, or if this was a variant of Electro from a universe that we had never seen before, or even if there was going to be no explanation, and they were just going to prioritize making him more comic book accurate over being consistent. And when he first shows up, he does kind of appear in his blue translucent form, and I will say I was fanboying out when he opens his eyes and the Electro theme plays, even if it was just for 2 seconds. So he collects electricity from those power lines, gets his human body back, and remarks about how the power that he has feels different. So the energy in the MCU is different from that in the Mark Webb universe, and that's why he's not blue anymore? The explanation is there, I guess, but it's pretty vague. And thirdly, there's the fact that Sandman never takes his human form for most of the movie. In Spider-Man 3, he was still able to do this. In No Way Home, he does take human shape, but he's still Anakin Skywalker's sleep paralysis demon. Throughout the movie, I thought to myself, they're obviously trying to hide the fact that they couldn't get Thomas Hayden Church back, but towards the end when he gets cured, and confirmed by the credits, it turns out they did have Thomas Hayden Church. So why didn't he take human form any other time? Why waste all that money on special effects that don't need to be there? This movie did slightly exceed my expectations in terms of how much was going to be done with Sandman. With his limited presence in the trailers, I figured that he was just going to be prominently featured during the climax, just to serve as the enemy Titan to take down. But instead, like all 5 villains, he was a fully realized character. However, this does make it disappointing that we don't learn anything more about him, other than that he has a daughter to return to, which is why he's the only one of the 5 villains who doesn't mind the idea of being sent back to his universe. The thing is, there was clearly more to Flint Marko's story after Spider-Man 3. We were left wondering, is he going to continue living as a criminal? Will he manage to save his daughter? Now, not only was Spider-Man 4 never made, at least not yet, but the opportunity wasn't taken in No Way Home to bring that much-needed clarity. However, the villain who was done better here than in the movie in which they were introduced was definitely the Green Goblin. In Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man, the Goblin was hysterical even in the moments where he was supposed to be scary. In No Way Home, it didn't come across as one of the wacky personalities of Kevin Wendell Crumb. It felt like a possession by an evil entity, and it was legit intimidating. Especially when the Green Goblin takes over Osborn and gives that monologue to Peter. "I've seen you from behind the frightened eyes of Norman Osborn, struggling to have everything you want, while the world tries to make you choose. Gods don't have to choose." Testing out my Green Goblin. Let him know if you think I should include him in the voice impression reel I've been wanting to do. And the dark turn I wasn't expecting was the Goblin killing Aunt May, a very harrowing scene that makes Peter begin to lose any hope of continuing to be Spider-Man without bringing harm to those around him. While I personally never liked this version of Aunt May, I still felt sad for Peter when seeing how he's affected. Seeing his expression of pure defeat when he's standing in the rain, and the hatred in his eyes during his final fight with the Green Goblin. We've never seen Tom Holland's Spider-Man look this way with this amount of gripping emotion. Now, I did my best to keep my distance from all the buzz surrounding this movie regarding all the speculation of who was going to show up. I told myself and recommended to others not to expect it and just let ourselves be surprised should it happen. There was even that statement made by Kevin Feige in which he told us to keep our expectations in check in terms of the characters who would appear. I tried to tell people that may or may not be a decoy, just heads up. I could see the overwhelming backlash that would have gone something like, "This movie sucks! Tobey and Andrew never appeared!" At which point Sony and Marvel would have been totally justified in responding with,
"I missed the part where that's my problem."
Yes, it did eventually become pretty obvious. I mean, did you see that Brazilian trailer where the lizard gets kicked in the face by the wind? I guess that was their way of drawing people further in by giving it away without giving it away. But still, when Ned tries using Doctor Strange's sling ring to make a portal to Peter, a Spider-Man mask turns toward it, and I immediately recognized the shape of the eyes down the dark alleyway, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is really about to happen. Man, what a joy it was to finally see Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man again after his story got cut short. So when Ned tries again to find the Peter Parker that he knows, we know exactly what's coming next. So I just blurted out in the theater, "Get your dancing shoes on!" I tell you, there was cheering aplenty when Andrew came into the scene. It was a madhouse of applause when Tobey Maguire stepped through the portal.
They love me.
Another way this movie exceeded my expectations is that Tobey and Andrew aren't in just 1 or 2 scenes. They get the entire third act. And it's the interactions between all 3 Spider-Men that are the highlight of the movie. From them discussing how they were affected by the ones they lost, to remarking about Tobey's organic web shooters, to Andrew cracking Tobey's back for him. And of course, if they were going to bring all 3 Spider-Men together, we all knew they had to do the meme. And they do. Twice, in fact. How dare you point at me? You were pointing first. I was pointing, you're pointing. It's different from regular pointing. You're accusing me of pointing while you're pointing. Now, there was one audience reaction that really confused me the first time I watched it. It's when Ned, wondering if there was another variant of himself in another universe, asks Tobey if he had a best friend, and Tobey tells him about how Harry died in his arms. To which I thought, yeah, Tobey, we remember. Very sad. Then suddenly, I find myself in a sea of laughter. I'm glancing around at the audience members and I'm thinking, what part of that is funny? Did I walk into a theater with a bunch of Tommy Wiseaus? My best friend died in my arms. After he tried to kill me. What a story, Peter, too. It took until my second viewing to realize that it wasn't what Tobey was saying that everyone was laughing at. It was Ned's scared reaction to it. That makes so much sense now. Although, shouldn't Toby have said he died in my arms after saving me? I feel like the fact that he spent his last moments fighting for you should be the stronger memory than when he was turned against you. But no, he couldn't mention that because that would make Ned feel a little better about where he might end up. One thing I had completely forgotten about until it got to this point in the movie was during a conversation between all three Peters, Andrew Peter is holding onto a guardrail. And I'm like, oh hey, that leaked footage of Andrew Garfield on set was real after all. Through all of these scenes, the thing that I liked most was seeing the contrast of how Toby and Andrew's Peters got past their living of two different lives, which Tom Holland's Peter is still stuck between. This is illustrated in that when Andrew first appears, he's in his Spider-Man suit, while Toby first appears dressed as a cool youth pastor. Toby mentions that he managed to work things out with Mary Jane, while Andrew says that after failing to save Gwen, there was nothing left for him but to be relentless in his fighting of crime, and therefore he embraced more of the Spider-Man life. That makes my opinions on these different iterations of Spider-Man feel validated. I always did see Tobey Maguire as the best Peter Parker, while I saw Andrew Garfield as the best Spider-Man. We get to the climax where the three Spider-Men are all swinging around on each other's webs, they cure each of the villains, allowing them to get their second chance, and we get a few good reconciliations between the villains and their respective Spider-Men. Like Tobey's Peter speaking with Doc Ock again. It was great to see that, knowing that in Spider-Man 2, Otto started out as something of a mentor for Peter, and the only moment that he had with him after his redemption was agreeing that the fusion reactor needed to be destroyed, sacrificing himself in the process. However, my favorite of these scenes had to be Andrew and Electro. I always felt like Electro should have gotten a redemption. I do get that there are times when the hero doesn't have a choice but to finish the villain off, and Electro had gotten to the point where he was just too dangerous. But I still felt kind of bad for him. Spider-Man was the one person who seemed to notice him, and he felt abandonment from him because of some mere misunderstandings. So I smiled seeing the two of them get the chance to reconcile. Electro reveals that he was a big fan of Spider-Man because he assumed him to be black, and they're both like, well, there has to be a black Spider-Man in some universe. Yes, there is. He's just a little more animated than most. Now, at the end of the final trailer, when we saw MJ falling in very much the same way that Gwen Stacy did when she died, I thought, wouldn't it be so cool if Andrew's Spider-Man is the one who swings in there and saves her? And sure enough, that's what happens. Absolutely beautiful, and so wholesome to see him in tears of relief, finally finding peace with himself. It was satisfying to see just this short continuation of Toby and Andrew's stories after they both got cut short, especially Andrew's. Yes, I always wished that there would have been another full movie for each of them, but after years of getting nothing, it was great to finally get something. So Doctor Strange loses control of the spell when the Green Goblin uses a pumpkin bomb to blow up the box containing it. By the way, I've been wondering, is pumpkin bomb actually the technical name for those things, or do we just call them that because of the Weird Al song? In any case, it's a really neat visual as the scenery is cracking open. Not even any objects, just thin air is breaking apart. As this happens, Toby stops Peter 1 from slamming the glider blades into Norman, preventing the Green Goblin from victory in corrupting Spider-Man. But before Peter 1 injects the Goblin with the cure, the Goblin stabs Toby in the back, in the literal sense, and immediately I was thinking, oh my gosh, are they killing off Toby? But Toby's just like, I'm alright, I've been stabbed before, so nothing really comes of that. I guess they just needed a reason for Toby and Andrew to have their arms around each other when they vanish back into their universes. This happens when Peter 1 tells Doctor Strange to cast a new spell that would make everyone forget who he is with no exceptions. It works, the multiverse seals up, and the two Spider-Men and the reformed villains are sent back to their worlds. I have to say this, the first spell that Strange casts did seem pretty selective in what point in time the villains are taken from their universes. With Doc Ock and the Lizard, it seemed to be right before they were reformed, but with Green Goblin and Electro, it was apparently the instant right before they died. I sure hope that was enough time for each of them to convince their Spider-Man that they had been reformed. Who knows, in the Mark Webb universe, it might have created a branched reality where Electro helps Spider-Man fight off Dane DeHaan's Green Goblin, and Gwen Stacy never dies. Kind of a bummer, though, that once Doc Ock returns, he's still coming back to a fusion reactor that he has to drown and take his own life in the process. That being said, when he appeared as a villain again in the trailer, I thought about his redemption in Spider-Man 2, as he destroys the fusion reactor. He proclaims to himself, "I will not die a monster." Before I saw No Way Home, it crossed my mind that the potential existed that it might render Doc Ock's last words meaningless, so I was very glad to see that it didn't. However, this would have been so cool. I so wish that there was a moment where Aunt May from the Sam Raimi universe shows up. I really think that she knew Peter was Spider-Man, but never said so. There are parts in Spider-Man 2 and 3 where, from the way that she speaks to Peter, I think it was meant to imply that she knew.
Lord knows, kids like Henry need a hero. Courageous, self-sacrificing people, setting examples for all of us. Even though sometimes we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most. Spider-Man did that for Henry, and he wonders where he's gone. He needs him.
Spider-Man killed him.
Spider-Man? I don't understand. Spider-Man doesn't kill people.
So it would have been fantastic to have gotten a confirmation of that in No Way Home, with a little moment between her and Tobey where he smiles upon realizing. No dialogue would have even been needed. She just had to be present, and the audience would have understood the significance of it. They totally could have done that. Rosemary Harris is still alive. Opportunity lost. And one last little tidbit, and this isn't something that I deduct any points from the movie for not doing, but I was kind of hoping that the credits would roll with Dashboard Confessional's Vindicated, the song that closed out Spider-Man 2. It just would have been one last good member berry to top things off. It's my favorite song in any Spider-Man movie, certainly better than the one that No Way Home did end with. In the mid-credits scene, Eddie Brock and Venom get sent back after they visited at the end of Venom Let There Be Carnage, but a little bit of the symbiote is left behind, and it starts crawling. I find this to be a rather peculiar time to make Venom the villain of the next movie, because at this point, Peter has no one left in his life, no one remembers him. All he has now is just being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. So what could Venom do to corrupt a hero who now has nothing to lose? I'm interested to see where that goes. As for Tobey and Andrew, is this farewell to both of them? After this movie's opening weekend, the hashtag #MakeTheAmazingSpider-Man3 really blew up online. It seems that Andrew's role in No Way Home really gave people a new appreciation for the Mark Webb movies that they didn't have before. I find that to be pleasantly surprising because I really think The Amazing Spider-Man 2 doesn't get enough credit. Sure, it has been 8 years, but there is still plenty of stuff they can do. Andrew only mentions the Rhino as one of the weird villains that he fought, probably implying that the Sinister Six still hasn't happened yet, despite how much it was built up. And Tobey Maguire, he said that he wanted as little of Peter's life after Spider-Man 3 to be revealed. So, could that mean that this isn't the last we'll see of him? This weekend, we got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, which is directed by Sam Raimi, ... But, regardless of what happens in the future, I will always be grateful to have gotten to see Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man one more time. On a final note, I am going to have to boost my initial score for this movie. I feel a bit more inclined to repeat viewings, and I realize Tom Holland and Willem Dafoe's performances really push the acting above a 7 out of 10. 83% for Spider-Man No Way Home. That's a wrap. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like and share, subscribe for more. This is Pop Culture. I'm Alex Pop.